Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. Wi-Fi 7 is becoming more prevalent now on consumer devices, and we're now seeing a bunch of Wi-Fi 7 routers and access points hit the market. This is a collection of some of the things that Asus is offering that support Wi-Fi 7. These are Wi-Fi mesh access points that also can serve as your router. And they've got a lot of different products to choose from. So I thought what I would do in this review is simplify as best I can how these mesh systems work, which one of these might be best for your environment. We'll look at performance, and we'll also look at some of the configuration options that these offer. It's very easy to get into the weeds when you look at this stuff. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible to help you make the right decision if you are in the market for a Wi-Fi system. And a lot of what we'll talk about today is applicable beyond these devices because we're going to cover some of the concepts as well. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that Asus sent all of this equipment to the channel free of charge. However, no other compensation was received. They have not reviewed or approved what you're about to see before this was uploaded, nor did they have any part in the production of this video, and all opinions are my own. So let's get into it now and see what these access points are all about. So on the desk here, I've got their low-end device. This is the BD5. This is their high-end, top-of-the-line model called the BT10. And this one here is designed for outdoor usage. It is weatherproof, and you can set it up outside to cover your entire yard. And these all work together. So for example, you could buy the high-end one as your router and main access point, and the lower-end ones can feed off of it and extend your Wi-Fi throughout the home. As you'll see in a few minutes, though, there are some considerations, especially if you have a lot of people on your Wi-Fi network and you want to maximize bandwidth. The low-end unit here cannot push as much data over wireless as the high-end one can, and that might make a difference if you're in a busy household with a lot of people streaming all at the same time. So how do these devices connect to each other? Well, there's two different ways you can do it. One is to have a wireless backhaul, and the other is to have a wired backhaul. And by backhaul, I mean, how do you get the data from a device on one end of your home, like this one, to the one that's actually connected to the internet? So in this instance, we've got a 3-pack of these Asus devices, and what they're doing is wirelessly transmitting from one box to the other until it gets out to the internet and back again. And these, of course, have to be overlapping, so you have to have a signal for the middle device that can pick up the one upstairs and the one downstairs. And that does take a little bit of time to get all of the placement correct. Unfortunately, everyone's home is different, so it's impossible to know exactly how many of these things that you need. But generally, the rule of thumb here is that if you got a big 3,000 or 4,000 square foot home, you're probably going to need to get 3 of these. That's about what I have here, and I've got 3 access points throughout the house to cover everything. In a smaller home, you could probably get away with the 2-pack. And my advice would be maybe get the 2-pack to start and then buy another one if you need it. And you can mix and match them a bit. Now, another thing that you can do to backhaul is to actually go over wired Ethernet. And this is always the best way to do it, because that way you're not relying on wireless connections to get your data back and forth. You can put it out over a faster wired connection, which is also more reliable. And if you've got a bunch of people using your network at the same time, everyone on the bedroom unit here has a direct home run line right down to the basement, and your middle one will have a much better performance when the other one over here is saturated. So wired is always the way to go. If you have Ethernet in your home, this is how I would set it up. If you don't have Ethernet, I will direct you to my series on a technology called Mocha, which allows you to do this wired backhaul over your existing cable television wiring. In my home, I cut the cord. I don't use my cable at all, at least for television, but I still have the wires, and I can use that as backhaul. So if you have cable outlets in every room, Mocha technology is a great way to get better performance out of your mesh system. And you might also be able to get away with a lower end model because you don't need as much robustness in between on the wireless connection to make that meshing work. And that brings us to the next topic, which is the number of bands that each of these devices supports. So the low end unit only supports 2 bands, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and it only has a 2x2 radio on board. This one, the high-end model, and I'll explain what all this means in a second, has 3 bands that it supports. It supports 2.4, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz. And this one's configured, at least at the high end, in the 4x4 configuration. And what that means is that on the 4x4 configuration, it can send out 4 different data streams. It can direct the data more accurately to the client or to one of the other access points in the home. And you basically have more wireless bandwidth to play with. And it can also dedicate one of the higher speed bands, either the 5 or the 6 gigahertz band, for backhaul. So what does that mean in real world performance? Well, what I did earlier is I took the master unit here and set it up down here in the basement. I took another one of these high-end units to serve as the mesh unit, and I put that one on the other end of the house, about 60 feet that way and 2 floors up. So we had all the floors and the walls and all the stuff in the walls in between these 2 devices. And to my surprise, the performance on the backhaul was very good. So check it out. Here we were running what's called an iPerf test, where we're just pushing data back and forth. And if you look at the lower number, that is the speed that we're getting at one point almost to a gigabit per second on the backhaul. It does fluctuate quite a bit because wireless can be very unpredictable depending on interference, but the average over the course of that test was about 727 megabits per second of backhaul, which means that if I had some computer connected to the one on the other end of the house, I'd have a lot of bandwidth to play with for uploading videos or streaming or whatever. Lots of room for a lot of people to do different things. I was very impressed with that performance. Now, what I also did is I took out my lower end model here and did the exact same thing. Again, set this one up down here, put another one up on the other end of the house. And with the lower end unit, we had a very different performance outcome when meshing wirelessly. As you can see here, we were only getting about 200 megabits per second or so. In fact, I didn't run as many simultaneous tests to get the aggregate number because 4 was maxing it out. We did a lot more on the higher speed connection, but there you can see we got about 265 megabits per second. So not as much, but if this was wired back to the main unit, we would get much better performance out of it, probably in the 700 to 800 megabits per second range, depending on the client. So as you can see here, if you've got the ability to backhaul with a wire, you can get away with lower cost mesh units and save your fancy one for your main connection. But if a wired backhaul is not possible in your environment, then I would suggest going with the BT8 or the BT10 to get the best performance when you are meshing from one unit to the other. Now, the BT10 is the one I've got here on the desk. This one I would suggest for people who have fast internet connections that go beyond 2.5 gigabits per second. The reason is at the moment, this one has 10 gigabit Ethernet ports, not only for your internet connection, but also any 10 gig clients that you might want to pop in. The BT8 and the lower end model here all max out with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet connections, but that's fine if you've got a 1 or a 2 gigabit internet connection at your home. So again, the BT10 probably for the higher speed folks. The BT8 is more than capable for people with internet connections that are closer to reality right now. Now, a little bit earlier, I did some Wi-Fi performance testing over Wi-Fi 7 just to see what the maximum performance we can expect out of these things. And the 2 clients that I had to connect, an iPhone 16 Pro Max and an Asus laptop, both only have 2x2 Wi-Fi 7 radios, which means that I'm not going to get the maximum performance out of the high-end unit. So this is kind of a real-world example of what kind of Wi-Fi performance you can expect. And what I did here is I ran internet speed tests because I have a 10 gig connection. On Ethernet, I can max that connection out. And this is a good way to get a feel for what it's really going to be like to use one of these Wi-Fi devices over the internet in your home. And on my phone, I was achieving 1.4 gigabits per second downstream and 1.6 gigabits per second on the upstream. That is pretty good for a Wi-Fi connection. Now again, this was in the same room as the high-end access point here. As you move further away and you get walls and other equipment in between you and your access point, that signal degrades and you'll see lower speeds, but still, that's pretty darn good, I think. The laptop also did about the same. We were getting about the same on the downstream, but the upstream got close to 2 gigabits per second. So overall, Wi-Fi 7 can deliver some very good performance here. And if you're hardwired, because the phone and the computer were both 2x2 radios, the performance drop-off on the low-end model isn't that significant. So you're going to get some great speeds even out of the cheaper model, provided you've got it wired into your network versus meshing through the other units. And the same can be said of this one too, because if I was connecting to the unit upstairs, I would be doing about 800 megabits per second, about half of what I can get down here with this one. So again, wired backhauling is always the way to go. Now, in addition to testing the Wi-Fi performance, I wanted to make sure the routing performance was decent as well, because these are, in most cases, going to be your gateway to the internet. And if your gateway is a bottleneck, that will slow everything down. So I did run a test off of the Ethernet here. One of the tests I ran was plugging my laptop into the 10 gig unit here and running an internet speed test. And I was able to get pretty much the full bandwidth of my 10 gigabit per second connection through the Ethernet on this. So its routing hardware was able to keep up. The BT8, which is the mid-range model below this one, has a 2.5 gigabit per second connection, the same as the little unit here. And both of those were able to maintain a 2.5 gigabit per second connection to the internet and back, routing to clients on the local network here without issue. So these shouldn't be a bottleneck for high-speed internet connections. Now, we haven't talked about the outdoor unit yet, but we're going to do that now. We'll set it up and get it up and running. Now, the outdoor unit has the same guts as the low-end one. So this is only a dual-band access point, 2x2 radio on board, but it is weatherproof and can operate outdoors. I think the best way to connect this one is through a wired backhaul, and the reason is that the outdoor access point supports power over Ethernet, which means that you can power this with the same cable that you're using to send data back into the home. So what I've done here is I've plugged in a power over Ethernet injector, and what I've got is an Ethernet cable going into the LAN port here on the main unit. And what we're going to do is connect the outdoor unit up to the injector so we can get both its power and its data. So we're going to pop this cable in here. And these injectors are very affordable, not hard to find on most online retailers. And as I plug the cable in here to the bottom, you will see that it's lighting up and powering up, and we can get up and running with it. Now, the back plane of this has some weatherproofing on it, so you can just run the Ethernet cable outdoors and you're good to go. It's low voltage. You don't have to call an electrician. You just have to get that Ethernet cable out of your home to the outdoors and you're up and running. It does give you the option to use regular AC power. It does come with a cable here that will plug into the bottom, but I found the cable is very short, and I think Ethernet is the way to go here. This is mountable on a table. You can mount it to the wall, and it also comes with some hardware to mount it to a pole as well. So very easy to get up and running with this. And I did test it a little bit earlier. The range is fine. I have about an acre in my backyard, kind of all open, and I was able to get a signal all the way down at the end of my yard, but I have reset it so that we can show you how you set up devices on this network. Now, Asus has two ways that you can administer this system. One is through a mobile app and the other is through a web interface. They both do the same things, but they look very different, and I'll show you all of that in a minute. But the setup process overall was super simple on this. I plugged everything in, got out my phone, and just followed the directions, and it was up and running within about 15 or 20 minutes. It wasn't difficult, and that included adding in some additional access points. One thing to note on here is that they also have some isolated networks that you can set up beyond just a guest network. So for example, one feature that I like quite a bit is the ability to have an isolated IoT network. This would be for all of your doorbells and light bulbs and all that smart home stuff. They don't tend to get updated all that often, and sometimes they can become security risks. So what it does is it takes all that stuff and puts it on its own network that's isolated from everything else. Likewise, you can set up a network for the kids that has different parameters on it than the rest of your network. You can limit their internet usage, again, through that kids network option. So you've got a lot of robustness to some of the routing options on here that I think are pretty useful, and it's nice to see it so easily set up here within the app. But what we're going to do, though, here is add in another access point, which is that outdoor access point that we just plugged in. So I'm going to go over here and add an AI mesh node. And what will happen here is it's going to search out on the network, and it should find that outdoor unit. There it is. I can tap on it, hit apply here, and it's going to bring it into the network and begin meshing it. Now remember, we plugged this one in via the wired interface, so we are hardwiring the backhaul on this. And again, that's what I would recommend for it. And once this setup process completes, I could put this access point outside and it's immediately on my network. So pretty much a one-click thing here to get up and running. I did have one of the access points get a little flaky on me at setup. I just reset it and everything worked fine, but generally my experience has been what you see here. It detects it automatically and it will automatically add it to your network. For those of you who are tech savvy, this is getting very similar to what we're experiencing with UniFi, where everything is kind of controlled by the central device in the chain, and it's all very easily administered. Let me show you a few other features on the mobile app, and then I'll show you what the web interface looks like. So here is our network configuration home screen on the mobile app. Here is my main access point, and then I have all of the mesh nodes connected to it listed down here. And as I add more, of course, those will come off there as well. One of those is currently offline. You can see that it's dimmed out. I can jump into, for example, our low-end unit here, the BD5, and see how it is doing. And right now we've got a great indication along with a signal strength readout. And what you can do here is position the access point and just keep referencing the app to get into a situation where you've got a good connection back to the host. Additionally, you can set up the preferred access point that it meshes through, because what these can do is actually mesh through each other to get back to the home base. So you could lock it into one of your access points in case it keeps switching between them, but auto will try to find the best output. And generally, I think for most consumers, auto is going to be fine, but if you're having trouble or seeing some connections drop in and out, perhaps locking that in would be a better option. You also have the ability to turn off the LED light and a few other things here as well. They also have some optimization features here that will try to automatically tune things, get it all in the right channel, and that might be worth pushing every once in a while just as a maintenance task. Now they've got a lot of stuff that you can do on the app for configuration, but I'm going to touch on a few things that stood out to me. So I'm going to go over to the client section here, and here you can see everybody that's connected to your network, and you can then jump into an individual device and do some different things to it. So for example, they have a family configuration here where you can set up a family profile. There are some privacy concerns with that because it does have some internet communication to try to figure out what content is appropriate. And what you can do here is assign devices to a specific individual in your family and then limit the types of things that they can do on the internet. Additionally, there's some other features that are built into this that allow you to set those settings on a device-by-device basis. So what I could do here is go over to the safe browsing function, and I could limit this to a profile where it will block ads and also restrict the child or whoever going to unfamily-friendly content. And this, of course, is all maintained by Asus. There are ways to circumvent this stuff, of course, but you do have some degree of filtering that you can apply to devices either as a profile, in other words, assigning devices to a specific kid and having that kid's profile follow them around to their different devices, or limit things on a device-by-device basis. Additionally, you can set some optimization for gaming or streaming or other activities. I've got so much bandwidth here, I haven't really needed to do that, but you do have that option. And you even have a bandwidth limiter to limit how much throughput a particular device has on your network. So it's pretty easy to get all these things dialed in without having to go into some crazy network configuration. But if you want to do that, you can go over to the settings here and browse through all of the different options that many of these routers have these days. So for example, we can jump over to our WAN section and do port forwarding and DNS and all of that good stuff. They also have a VPN server built in, so you can log into your network remotely and securely. So you can get that enabled, and they walk you through that process. It supports everything from point-to-point tunneling protocol all the way over to OpenVPN and WireGuard. So a good amount of features here. This is what I would expect out of a high-end router, and this has most of those features you would expect. Now there's also a web interface that you can access with a web browser. This is old school, as you can see, but it works, and it's got all of the same features that you'd find in the mobile app. It's just not as pretty. This interface has not been changed in probably over a decade, but if you are an advanced user and familiar with the Asus router line, this will be very familiar to you because everything looks the same and all of your standard settings are usually in the same place here. So good stuff. I think it's good for both advanced users and those who are first getting into this or just want a set and forget kind of thing. It does serve both audiences. So overall, I found this to be a very robust Wi-Fi solution, especially on the higher end BT8 and BT10 units. Again, this is 4x4 on both the 5 gigahertz and the 6 gigahertz network. The BT8 is 3x3 across those two networks, Performance is great on these. It's the best, though, if you can hardwire all of your backhaul in. But if that's not a possibility, it's very much a point-and-click kind of solution to get everything up and running. I think most people can get this working without a lot of technical know-how. My only gripe here is that they don't have enough Ethernet ports, especially on your base unit, because if you are looking to do backhaul via a wire, it would have been nice to have had more ports on the back than what you end up with here. So you will need probably a network switch or something if you are connecting back multiple access points over your wired connection. But wirelessly, of course, everything worked fine. I really like the outdoor unit. I don't like the power solution they give you with it, but the PoE makes it a very easy to set up solution that can work without having to get an electrician out there to get everything hooked up and operating. So all in, a nice product selection from Asus. They are a bit on the pricey side. I'll put a link in the video description to the Amazon page where you can see what all the current pricing is. With tariffs going up and down every other day, who knows what this stuff costs. But at the moment, this one was made in Taiwan. These two were made in Vietnam. But even with those countries of origin, there are some tariff issues that do arise. So check the link for the latest pricing. But they are a bit on the pricier side. This is definitely more of a higher end product. That will do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.